Hello and welcome to A Sense of Centerville in Washington Township, your place for stories about ordinary and extraordinary residents and places in the Centerville and Washington Township area. I'm Susan from Centerville-Washington History, and I look forward to hearing your story. Today, my guest is Greg Horn. Greg Horn is a native of Wooster, Ohio, and has been married to Cathy for 49 years. They raised 3 sons who are all CHS graduates and are now married. He enjoys being a grandfather to 6 wonderful grandchildren. Greg Horn was the city manager for Centerville from 1992 to 2017. Before coming to Centerville, he served as city manager for Tipp City for 7 years, village manager in Minerva, Ohio for 5 years, and as city administrator in Hermann, Missouri. Greg Horn received a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Bowling Green State University and then a master's degree in public administration from the University of Missouri. And welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you sharing some of your history of the time that you were Centerville City Manager. So I think that there'll be some great stories that will come out here.
I hope some will be interesting, yes.
Yeah, well, let's go a little bit and talk about your history first. So how did you become interested in city administration or public administration?
Well, it was a kind of a roundabout story. I was a high school graduate in Wooster High School area, attended Bowling Green State University, and I was a political science major. And my junior year, we did a kind of an internship project with the City of Toledo Fire Department. So that was really my first exposure to municipal government. I had a professor there that encouraged me to consider getting a master's degree in public administration and perhaps going into government. But I pretty much decided I was going to go to law school. So I ended up applied for both, kind of at his urging. And I was planning on starting that fall, my senior year. Then after we graduated, I was going to be going to High Northern University, and I've been accepted there for law school. And then that summer, about 2 months before law school started, I got a call from the University of Missouri telling me that someone had had an accident, unfortunately. They had an assistantship available, which was essentially a full stipend, very attractive financially to go to graduate school in Missouri. And it was mine, but I had to give them a decision in about 3 days. And my fiance at that time was managing the local city swimming pool. And I went up there in my lunch hour, told her the news. And I think we got married 3 weeks later and took off with a U-Haul truck and moved to Missouri. And I entered graduate school and called a High Northern and said I was not going to be coming that fall as a first-year law student. So once I got into the MPA program at Missouri, it was a 2-year program, and we had to do an internship between the first and second year. We came back to the city of Wooster, where my wife was, again, operating the swimming pools or managing the pools for the city. And then I did an internship there with Phil Hockey, who was a young, really dynamic, neat director of administration. And I just absolutely loved it that summer. So when I went back for my second year at Missouri, I knew that municipal government is where I wanted to go.
Wow, it's always fascinating how things kind of line up. So a 3-week engagement, and then
well, we've been engaged a little
you
while,
had been, okay.
But we were not going to get married right away because I was going to be entering law school and she was going to teach for a while. Mm-hmm. But with the assistantship at Missouri, it made it financially achievable to make it all work, and so we changed our plans and packed up our truck and moved to Missouri.
So it was a financial decision.
That was part of it. That was part of it, yes.
Yeah, well, it ended up working well for you.
Well, it's lasted pretty well for 49 years. She's tolerated me. So.
Yeah, well, you seem like a good couple. That's great. Okay, so you spent a long time in Missouri. What brought you then back to Ohio?
Well, it was interesting because my second year of graduate school, you start preparing your resume, you start thinking about careers. And I assumed perhaps I would head back to Ohio and perhaps try to find something in local government. And I was contacted by the city of Hermann, Missouri, through the university's MPA program, and they were hiring their first village administrator. And Hermann, Missouri is a little town that's located about halfway between Columbia, Missouri, where I was attending graduate school, which is in the center of Missouri, and St. Louis. And it's a Germanic culture center. It's right on the Missouri River. It was founded in the 1800s, kind of a German settlement society. and county seat, wineries, breweries, all these old historic brick buildings. Just it's very picturesque. And so I went over there and interviewed at the ripe old age of 24 to be their first village administrator, and they hired me, to my surprise, about 2 months before I finished graduate school. And now my wife will tell you that part of the reason I got the job was the town needed a science teacher, and they had a hard time recruiting science teachers to that little town. So when they found out she was a science major and had her teaching certificate in Missouri, I think they got a package deal from us.
They wanted to keep you guys in the area.
That's right. So we ended up and moved to Hermann. I actually started about 2 months before I graduated and drove back and forth. And it was just a tremendous learning opportunity because it was a small town, maybe 4,000 people at that time. And again, as I mentioned, it was a county seat, but it was totally independent and it was fairly isolated. And it had its own sanitary sewer system. It had its own water system. It had its own electric system, its own natural gas system that they sold to a couple other smaller communities. It had its own airport, very small airport, but nonetheless had an airport, hospital, fire department, cemeteries, swimming pool, parks. So I immediately had exposure to almost every facet of local government in an independent setting. So it was a little trial and error at that age.
In your 20s.
I'm 20. I'm 24. I'm the youngest manager in Missouri at that time. But
Wow.
it was. I had department heads that were, old enough to be my grandparents. But it was a really interesting time and very enjoyable.
That's amazing. So then you took a lot of different jobs. Than the Ohio. That was it.
A couple years later, I was offered a position to come back to Ohio, a community called Minerva, which is east of Canton. And it was between maybe 4,000 and 5,000 people, a lot of industry there on Route 30. And we were finding most of our vacations were coming home for, family events, et cetera. And we were getting ready to think about starting a family. So I took the job in Minerva that I was offered. And we were in Minerva about 5.5 years. And started our family there and had our first 2 children there. So that took us through probably 1985, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And then was Centerville the one you came to next?
No, I was contacted by a recruiter in 1985, and they wanted to know if I'd be interested in applying for Tipp City, for the city manager position in Tipp City. And I honestly didn't know anything about Tipp City, but I drove down there, loved the community, and had heard great things about the schools. My wife's parents were in Cincinnati, so it was going to be fairly close to them. Mine were still up in Wooster, Ohio. And so I was offered that job, and we moved in 85. We moved to Tipp City, and we ended up and had our 3rd child there, Alex, our youngest son. And so we were there about 7.5 years. Mm-hmm. And that took us up to about 1992.
Mm-hmm. All right. So there was a long-term city manager. What was the name?
Daryl Kenning.
Daryl.
Yes.
And he'd been in
Centerville about 17 years.
Okay. So a long time. And at that point, did they come out find you, or did you find them?
Well, it was interesting because Daryl had mentioned to me that he was going to be retiring, and
so you knew him.
Yes, and a great guy, really, really super person, and is no longer with us, but served Centerville very well. But I'd see him at manager meetings in the area, and he said, you might want to be thinking about my position. Take a shot at that if you get an opportunity, because I'm going to be retiring. So I kind of had it in the back of my mind, but I didn't know if I was really ready for that or not. And then we had actually lived in Tipp City for, at that time, probably close to 7 years. And we just bought another house because we had the 3 sons. We needed more room. So we just bought another house in Tipp City.
So timing wasn't great.
No. So the day we were moving from one part of town to the other to this new home, I got a call from Mayor Shirley Heinz. And she asked me if I'd be interested in interviewing for the Centerville City Manager position, that they had a list of people that they were reaching out to, and they needed to try to make it happen fairly quickly because they had a major project that they were getting ready to embark upon. And would I be willing to come down and meet with them and talk to them about the job? So it was pretty ironic, again, the day we were moving, but talked it over with my wife. I agreed to go meet with them. And then a few weeks later, I was offered the Centerville job. So I think we came within about a week of owning 3 homes because we were buying a home in Centerville, had not quite sold the one we were just moving from in Tipp City, and had our new home in Tipp City. But it all worked out.
So you didn't just commute for a while.
I commuted for about 3 months, I think. Wow. Yes, but we wanted to get the kids moved in before school started. I started in '92 at the end of June, and I think we moved down here probably about the end of August.
And she worked for Centerville as well for a while.
She did. When we first got here, Cathy was she'd gone back to school. She'd been a science teacher, a math teacher, but she'd gone back to school to get her library media specialist. She wanted to be a librarian, and so she was offered a position in the Oakwood schools. And I think it was kind of a long-term fill-in. So she was there maybe a year or two in Oakwood, and then eventually joined Centerville Schools, and ended up working with Centerville Schools for I think 17 years, and was their she was the librarian at the high school.
Yeah. When my kids were there, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some of those highlights, some of the highlights of your time as the Centerville City Manager.
Well, I don't. It was an active time. When I first got there in '92, which was one of the things really intriguing about the job, the city had decided that they were going to build a golf course, and they really wanted it to be a golf community. Residential, golf, a clubhouse would be a community gathering place. So the council at that time really had a major vision to do something pretty unique and pretty different. Centerville-Washington Township was continuing to develop fairly rapidly, and to try to put together that size of a parcel of ground to do something like that, they knew if they didn't move fairly quickly, they would never have that opportunity again because, again, of all the development that was popping up throughout the city and the township. So they had worked about a year before I got there on putting together the land and assembling that. And the former mayor was involved in that. He came back and participated.
Is this Vic Green?
Vic Green, yes. And so it's kind of an interesting history there. And so they had to work a little bit clandestinely to try to assemble those pieces of land because they didn't want the prices to go up on them by the time they put together several parcels. But he and Daryl Kenning and others were able to put that together. But the township was a little disappointed that the city was doing that. I don't know all the background on that, but it ended up in an annexation battle. So when I started there in '92, the project was in process as far as planning. The architect had been hired, and the golf course designer, Gene Bates, had been hired. And they were well underway with their design work, but the annexation was going through the court system. And it was just a really stressful and interesting time to see how that was going to play out because there was a lot at stake.
So you were jumping into that.
I was jumping into that. I think they had the city had, if I'm correct on this, I believe they had lost the annexation at the I think it was the common pleas level, and they had lost it at the appeals level. And when I got there, it was being appealed to the Ohio Supreme Court, hoping the Ohio Supreme Court would take the case. So it was that close. And the Ohio Supreme Court ended up taking the case. I was on board when we had the hearings. The court was traveling around the state at that time occasionally, and our hearing was actually in Hamilton, Ohio. And I remember attending the Ohio Supreme Court hearing on the annexation in Hamilton. And probably 2 months later, something like that, we got a unanimous ruling in favor of the city by the Ohio Supreme Court. So that was a major relief for everybody involved in the project.
Yeah, because they've already purchased
They had purchased the ground. They had made some major commitments, and it was going to be very awkward to do the project if it wasn't going to be in the city limits. Mm-hmm. So everything worked out.
Yeah, so Township was a little unhappy about that. There was a lot of tension there.
It created some scar tissue. Yeah. But I think everybody's gotten over it, after 25 years or 30 years.
You never know, but that's not what that's not what we're talking about today.
Right, that's correct.
Okay, well that sounds like an interesting project to be involved in. So that's a highlight.
It was unbelievable. The council really wanted a 10 or 12 year commitment because they knew they'd put together about 470 acres. And again, the plan was to have an 18-hole course with a 3-hole practice course, very extensive outdoor practice facilities, driving range and that. But they really wanted a nice residential community to be kind of the focus of it. And they were looking for a manager, I think, that was going to stay around for a while. And I gave them that commitment. But what was a 10 or 12-year project probably ended up being about a 20-year project, to be honest. And then we added ground. We broke ground in 92 in the fall. We opened 9 holes in 94. And then we opened the other 9 holes in the clubhouse. It was around July 4th weekend of 95. And it was just a great celebration. And then it was about 5 years later, about 2000, we decided to take the 3 practice holes and add acreage to it and create a third 9. And from a golfing standpoint, a 27-hole course is really about as practical as you can be from a maintenance standpoint, because it's not that much more to maintain 27 holes, but the revenue stream is substantially better than 18. So we expanded the course, opened it up, I think 2000, 2001, 27-hole facility. That opened up more housing. So I think today there's probably close to 700 homes there and probably, $500 million of real estate. So it's been, I think, a very successful project.
Mm-hmm. And toward the end of the project, let's see, we've gone through several mayors at that point, right? So Shirley was through 96.
Yes, Shirley Heinz was the mayor when I got there. The first council I worked with, I have obviously very fond memories. We went through a lot together, but, tremendous people. I mean, you had Shirley Heinz, you had Sally Beals, you had Jim Singer, we had Mark Kingseed, Brooks Compton. It was a really stellar crew and a lot of fun and a lot of excitement during those years.
That's great. Okay, so that's the big one.
Yes.
Any other projects that stand out?
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I guess from a project standpoint, probably a lot of focus had been on the golf course. Again, it took many years. And so when we had that worked out, we had the financing worked out, and the debt stream was being retired actually ahead of schedule. So everything was going very well there. Then the next major project was the police station, because the police station really had been put off for a long time. And the police were in the lower level of the municipal building, which is probably about 10 or 15% of the space they have today. Had far outgrown it, had taken over the little annex building in the back where the Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles operate. So that was the next big project, and that was about a 2 or 3 year project in the making. And I think we opened that in 2000 or 2001. Chief Walker, Chief Robertson, all of our staff were heavily involved in that project. We toured facilities around the region. Just a lot of effort went into that. And I think one of the things we were most proud of was when we opened it debt-free. And so, at that time, that was a $6 or $7 million project. It'd probably be $30 million today, but the facility still serves the community very well. It was very unique. We wanted a kind of an open forum area. We wanted a meeting room that the community could also use. We didn't want it to have that, kind of police correctional type of look. And we incorporated a range into the building because we never had an indoor range before. So I think that building will meet the city's needs for many more years to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did a tour of it with Girl Scouts when I was a Girl Scout leader. So it is beautiful. And I love that there's events, with the artist in the center. It brings people in the facility.
Exactly. And that's what we wanted it to be, more than just a police station. So it really is a kind of a community facility.
And the training room is often for
And Centerville, events. I know we always did, and I know they still continue to host a lot of regional training through other law enforcement agencies, a lot of cooperative efforts. So, Centerville, I think, has really been a leader in that area.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about Benham's Grove?
Sure.
Is that one that became? Was the city purchased that before you got here?
Yes, they had purchased it before I had. The renovation was pretty much complete. Mm-hmm. We had the designer showcase. Dayton Philharmonic event. That was that spring. That was actually of 92, just as I was coming on board. There were a lot of things left to do, but again, the project had gone very well. Sally Beals was very instrumental in that. Judy Gillen on our staff was very involved, as were others. And that project, I think, was really kind of a blessing to save that ground downtown and not let it turn into a strip center development or something. So then we worked with other groups to continue to enhance it. The Friends of Benham's Grove was formed. They became very active. They did the brick plaza that would expanded the outdoor area behind the barn. The Rotary organization, which I was a part of for my 25 years here, they stepped up and played a major part in constructing the gazebo. A lot of wedding events and things were held there, and then we also added the outdoor patio area behind the home. So there were a number of enhancements over the years, but obviously the most recent enhancements have taken it to a whole nother level now.
Yeah, definitely. And there's opinions with that, but I think it's beautiful. I think it's great to have these new things to keep business local.
Right.
Local for sure. Some of the other things that you wanted to talk about were the beautification of the 675 Ohio 48 interchange.
Yeah, we went through, I think the community was maturing and developing a little more, and I think we were able probably to pay a little more attention to some of the detail. And quite frankly, as the city matured and had more businesses, we had more revenue to do some of those things. So we started a number of enhancement efforts, and the staff was very involved in the design of that, kind of gleaning ideas from other communities and things. But if you will remember, and I'm not sure when you folks moved into the community, but Main Street, for instance, Main Street was kind of open ditches and cattails and weeds from about Spring Valley south, and a little bit of that to the north. And so the city had started, Steve Feverson, Alan Schwab, and others, Norbert Hoffman, they had started utilizing boulevards on a section of Clio Road. And when I got here, the section of Clio Road, I think from Franklin to maybe Alex Bell, had been widened and improved, and there were boulevards in that. And I just thought that look was tremendous in terms of changing the appearance when you came into the community. And so we were able to kind of put together a plan and decide that every time we did an improvement, we were going to go back in and boulevard our streets. So as we finished Clio Road to Bigger and then Bigger to Wilmington Pike, all that has been boulevarded. When we did the widening of Wilmington Pike, we added boulevards to that.
What does boulevard mean?
Just the green medians to be able to plant trees in the middle of the street and flowers, and just again to really help soften and beautify the streetscape in the community and your travel ways. And then we did that on West Franklin Street with the changes there. And then as we redeveloped Main Street with the new ornamental lights and some of those features, we added boulevards on Main Street, pretty much from Social Road up to, say, toward Bethany. And so I think that's one of the enhancements that I feel really good about. And our staff played a major role in that to just make Centerville stand out a little bit. And so as Cornerstone developed and Feedwire and other areas, we've continued those boulevards. And I think Centerville's kind of gotten a reputation for that. We did have a couple target areas, and 48 and Alex Bell and 675 was one of them. And an interesting story behind that, we had 3 little modest rental homes on that corner.
Yeah.
And a gentleman had bought those for an investment, and he owned a gas station here in the town. And I used to stop at his gas station probably about every week or so and get gas and chat with him. And he was always talking to me about trying to get that land rezoned. And he wanted to put another gas station in on that corner. And I kept telling him that's never going to happen. And I kiddingly always told him it'll never happen as long as I'm here, and that we don't need a gas station at the corner of Main Street and Alex Bell. So this went on for a couple of years. And I kept asking him if he would be interested in selling it. And meanwhile, I was talking to council and kind of encouraging them that if we had a few extra dollars, that would be I just felt like that would be a great purchase for the future to kind of clean up our entryway. And council seemed receptive to it as long as we could, obtain it for a reasonable price. So kind of had that in the back of our mind. Well, then there was a fire with one of those homes and decided not to rebuild it. And so I felt like that was the opportunity that, once they had received their insurance proceeds, now they had 2 houses left. If we were ever going to buy that piece of those 3 lots, that's the time to do it. And so we were fortunately able to get them to sell. And I think that's just become a nice asset for the community visually.
It has a little green space as you enter.
It just kind of breaks it up with all the asphalt at that major interchange.
Yeah.
So that, and then we've tried to do those kinds of things, around the community, and obviously with Cornerstone and some of that, there's been additional green space areas that have been developed.
Yeah. Well, definitely, I've been here long enough to see the difference. And I remember talking to my husband many times about how much that did add a lot of beauty to the community.
It really does.
With that little green space.
Yeah. And I think everybody that even lives in that region, it's just that area of the community. It's a little nicer coming and going home now.
Yeah.
Little different feel.
Yeah, people don't recognize, but that really makes a difference.
It does.
Yeah,
It does.
yeah, and the medians as well,
Yeah.
adding the boulevard, I guess,
Right.
effect. Yeah. Is there anything we didn't cover that we should?
Well, I think we took that same thought process again with our staff kind of leading the way and working with some of the businesses, and then took on that little area at 48 and Franklin Street.
Mhm.
We had a lot of parking issues down there. We had a series of lots that kind of joined each other in kind of a jigsaw area. We had old overhead power lines and trash dumpsters and all that. So, gosh, that was probably around 2000 when Graders and City Barbecue came in, and we were able to piggyback with them and put in that parking lot and developed a parking lot there by the Asher Wright House and kind of get that plan started. And then we were able to go across the street, and 2 or 3 of the older buildings were removed, and ended up with the Panera building that went in at that time, which is now what Agave and Rye, and then worked with the Township and worked with other property owners in that area to acquire easements over all the rear of those properties, and put in the new parking and interconnect all those areas together. And it's nice now to see that the city's continuing to try to expand that effort, because I think it's really cleaned up the rear of a lot of those properties downtown. It's created some gathering places, and I just think it gives the downtown a much kind of cozier, warmer feel than what it was like many years ago in some of those rear elevations.
Yeah, because it gives you a reason to go.
It does.
And,
it does.
And
some of them have added patios now to the rear. And so, I think it's because with the street being widened, and that was widened, I know, before I came on board, but with the state widening Franklin Street, it's very limited as to anything being done along the curb areas down there because it's so tight with a tight curb lawn and a tight sidewalk. So patio enhancements, things like that, just seem like they almost fit a little better to the rear.
Yeah, because there's nowhere to go without knocking a house down. We're definitely not for that.
Right.
So let's talk about the addition of Miami Valley South Hospital. That was one of the things that happened while you were.
Yes. Premier Health Network owned that property when I came to town. And we were told at that time there wasn't really a plan so much as there was just owning a piece of property for the future in case they needed it. So we made a point of about every year, maybe every 2 years, we would meet with the major players at Premier Health Network. We'd be kind of insistent that we get an audience with them to talk about what their plans were. And as the southern area of Dayton developed, there was discussion that maybe Premier was going to go toward 75 and possibly do something south of the Dayton Mall. We were very concerned because we felt like, for years that a major health facility had been planned for that, at least preliminarily. We really wanted to kind of see it stay there. They had been offered incredible amounts of money by large retailers to buy that site at Wilmington and 675. So about every year or two, somebody would approach us, they would approach Premier, and they would start talking about another huge big box retailer. And so we were very concerned that maybe a medical facility would not take place there. So we worked with them. We helped, I'm not going to say to a large part, but we did help, I think, induce some of their decision making because council was willing to cooperate with some widening programs along Wilmington Pike and some widening programs along Clio and some signalization needs that needed to be met, and some utility upgrades, et cetera. And so I think maybe a little bit because of that, but I'm sure the big reason was how it fit their system. They decided to go forward. And our staff worked. Steve Feverston, our planner, had known the architect from way back that was doing their project. And I just felt like there was such a synergy there in terms of being able to get something the community would be proud of in terms of the architecture and how it blended in with Centerville. Just a magnificent facility, and it's continued to grow. And so we've been very proud of that. And like I said, our staff just played a huge part in that, working, I think, very closely with the hospital and trying to get a design that would work for everybody. And
having that in that location, it's great for our community.
Oh, it's fantastic. It really is.
You mentioned Steve a couple of times, and I know him from Centerville-Washington history, which he was involved in as president.
Right.
What did he do for the city?
He was our city planner.
Okay.
He was our city planner. Yeah.
And so planners and city managers, how does that work?
Well, he was one of our staff members, and he would be, so if anyone wanted to come in for planning and development, for permitting, for new locations of facilities, et cetera. They would work through Steve, or before Steve, Alan Schwab, who you probably know. And those guys over the years just did a tremendous job, and their entire staff, in really trying to fine tune projects. And it's a delicate balance, because obviously the marketplace wants to do things a certain way, and they don't want to be inhibited. But the city, I think, many times can kind of encourage and kind of guide. And I think our staff did that very well. And so we were able to kind of create a certain look and a certain feel, and the architecture really kind of blended in the community. It maybe didn't happen every time, but I think overall we were very pleased with the outcome of many of those projects.
So having an overview of the vision, and then
yes, having a vision, paying attention to the detail. It was kind of the same way at the southern end of town, the Elder Beerman facility. It had slipped over the years, and it had kind of outlived its usefulness, and that shopping center was slipping, et cetera. And I know our staff did a major study, and focus groups had people come in and participate, et cetera, to talk about the long-term redevelopment of that. And so the Kroger Marketplace was kind of the first piece of that. And then, we didn't want that to go on to the south. There was discussion that the marketplace may go an interchange or two to the south on 48. And it would have been tough to backfill and stabilize that area commercially. We know eventually that may happen, but we were trying to hold it off, obviously, for another decade or two. So enticing Kroger Marketplace, working with them, we had to take care of the neighborhood situation to the rear, elevation to the west, to make sure they were accommodated with mounding and plantings. And so a lot of attention went into that to make it all work. But I think once Kroger's made that commitment, then I think that's been the springboard that's allowed a lot of the other things to happen. And our staff did some preliminary planning, and a lot of that now is taking place. So that's good to see.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Any other things?
The Public Works Center
that
was a huge project.
Okay.
Like I said, we were kind of knocking them off one at a time. Part of that was due to funding. Part of that was due to staff availability. But with Yankee Trace pretty well along, then we tackled the police station. Mm-hmm. And then about late 2008, 2009, we started planning for the Public Works Center. And the Public Works Center had been on South Suburban Drive. And it was really kind of an old framing shop by a home builder where they would make some wall sections and trusses and things like that. The area had gotten a little seedy, to be honest, and the buildings were old, pretty dilapidated metal buildings, kind of a series of those that were interconnected. We had virtually no ventilation in the buildings, so working on trucks in the wintertime, you had to keep the windows open in the offices because of the diesel fumes. We had no floor drainage system. So if you imagine bringing trucks in the middle of the night with the ice and the snow and trying to repair them, and what a mess that was. Plus we had, at that time, probably a couple $1 million, I'm sure it'd be much more today, of equipment stored in buildings that essentially were fire traps with no suppression systems, and a lot of eggs in one basket if you had a fire. Mm-hmm. So there were a number of reasons that we needed to upgrade that facility, but it had been put off. And so once the police station was done, open debt-free, we started preparation for the Public Works Center. So that opened about 2010. Steve Weaver, who's no longer with us, Public Works Director, was involved in the first part of that, Rob James and others. And, we spent a lot of time looking at other Public Works Centers around the area, and then opened that project. And that was probably another $7 million project in 2010 dollars, mm-hmm. but it opened debt-free. And so we were tickled with that. And I know there's been some expansion of that already, but it was just something that was sorely needed in the community for our Public Works employees.
Yeah, and included in that, the automated refuse system.
There are not very many communities left in the Miami Valley that still do their own refuse. Mm-hmm. Most of it's been contracted out. And Centerville still did their own. And there was a discussion a number of years ago about whether we're going to stay in the refuse business or not. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of around the time that we were building a new Public Works Center, because if you're going to build a Public Works Center, you need to know if you're going to stay in the refuse business, because those are big trucks, take special lifts, got to have higher garage bays for maintenance. So that was really the time to make that decision. And I think all the feedback that we got and the council was getting was that people really appreciated the Public Works. They appreciated the local service, the consistency of it. and really wanted us to stay in the business. So we looked at, can we stay in it and be cost effective? And one of the issues that came up was personnel, injuries. It's a tough job when you're out there in the elements, throughout the week, throughout the year. And we decided that if we were going to stay in it, we needed to automate, and we needed to be able to get away from having employees lugging 40, 50, 60 pound cans all day long, and the injuries and the workers' comp claims and all the things that came from that. So we reviewed a number of systems around the region, and then chose the type of trucks, type of lifts we were going to use, and then really took our time and implemented it over a few years, to try to keep it as trouble-free. And because that's a major issue in people's lives, changing their trash service. And it was funny because we did have some naysayers when we started it. We started to automate. You mean I can only have 1 or 2 cans and not 5 small ones? Yes. And I don't think today people would even give up those toters because they're so used to them. And and they take them out and do their yard work and everything else. But so I think it's been a successful system. Recycling then was switched a little later, and the city's continued to modernize and replace those trucks. And I would assume that the community will continue to provide that service as long as they can do it in a cost-effective manner.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that other places don't do it that way.
Right.
So that's pretty amazing. Okay, we've covered a lot of topics. Let's see what we still... Yeah, let's talk about working with different city mayors and other city council members. So how does that go? And
yeah, that's always been a really interesting part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
And my background is probably not the normal way to become a city manager, because I think most people probably go into smaller communities or maybe a larger community and end up working in a budget analyst role or some kind of a mid-level assistant role, and kind of work their way through. I kind of went into the small communities and just kind of jumped right in at like I said, at 24. So it was a little more trial and error on my part. So my whole life, I've never had one boss. What I've always had is an entire council. And so starting with it's always been between 5 and 7, depending upon which community I was in. And so I was thinking the other day when you called me, I think I've had, in the last 25 years in Centerville, I had 4 mayors and I think 18 or 19 council members. And if I totaled it up over my career, probably was a dozen mayors and probably, 30 council members. So that's really unique, because in any job, to get anything done, you have to have cooperation, and you have to have a reasonable amount of consensus, and there's always different opinions, and that's life. But that's probably been one of the most interesting parts of my job, or of any city manager's job. And it'd be similar for a school superintendent, is, working with the boards evolving, the boards changing, and, the give and take that goes with that, and just the learning process. But, in hindsight, I wouldn't have traded it. I mean, that's been probably the neatest part of the job. It's just the people I've met, the unique individuals, the circumstances. It's been tremendous.
Wow, I really hadn't even considered that you've always had city council as your boss.
I've always had at least 5 bosses
or
at one time.
trustees, right? Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Okay, let's talk, if you don't mind, about some of the challenges facing during your tenure and how they were resolved.
Yes. You like to remember the successes and the good times, but there are challenges, there's no question about it. I think probably some of the bigger challenges would be development issues, and whether you've got a new industry wanting to come into your community, or a new residential subdivision, or a new commercial development. Those can be very traumatic times for a community, and sometimes they turn out well. Sometimes they, you can appease as many folks as you can, and sometimes it doesn't work. Infill development, which is probably the toughest thing, is once a community gets pretty well developed and you've got a few select parcels to fill in, those are the ones that are always problematic, because people get used to having that field next door, or they get used to having that woods next door, and they don't remember sometimes that somebody owns that.
Yeah.
And somebody bought it, or it's been zoned years ago, or it was always planned for development. I kiddingly say that when cities put streets in that stop at certain points, you should have a sign at the end of all those streets telling people this street most likely will be extended someday, because sometimes it takes many years and people come in and buy those homes. And then 10 years later, along comes that extension of the street. And
people aren't happy.
And they say, I was told it was never going to go anywhere, or it was always going to be a field, or the realtor told me that, or what have you. So yeah, those are probably the toughest issues that any city manager deals with.
And that happened in our neighborhood.
It happened in our neighborhood exactly. Yeah, with the Pleasant Hill area. Yes, a number of years ago. Yep.
Yeah. But it's a park now.
It's a park, yeah. And as long as you've got a park district that's able to come in and buy some of those parcels, that takes away a lot of aggravation and a lot of stress.
Yeah, but that doesn't always happen.
That's correct.
All right. Any other things to talk about?
I think tax issues. Well, I would talk about a couple things. I guess, first of all, collective bargaining is always a big issue. And I have a lot of my colleagues that have been city managers for years or still are in city management. They go through a lot of tough times with collective bargaining. And
explain what that is.
Basically, negotiation with your employees through it's normally union organizations or collective organizations for wages and benefits. It can certainly be stressful. You have economic factors take into account, and a lot of times, the city's not going to support additional taxes, so you've got to be very prudent and very frugal with what types of increases you're going to grant. Sometimes those can turn into contentious issues. You can have labor stoppages. You can have complaints and grievances filed, and it can get pretty rough. I've been very fortunate because the communities that I've worked in have tended to be a little smaller, with Centerville being maybe 25,000, but I haven't had it. I've had some unions over the years, but in most places it's not been antagonistic. Most places it's been a good working relationship. Centerville was extremely unique because I think when I retired in 2017, we were probably the largest city in Ohio that did not have one collective bargaining unit, which is unheard of for a town of 20, 25,000 people. It doesn't mean we made everybody happy all the time, but generally I think our employees were fair. They were reasonable, and our department heads did a really good job of trying to keep an open door kind of policy and hearing people out. So I feel good about that and about this community because, again, we didn't have those kinds of issues and probably grievances. We probably had 4 or 5 in 25 years. So I think that spoke very highly of the caliber of people that we had.
Definitely. That's great. Let's talk about the tax recession. So there was a long tax recession and no income increases. So how was that able to happen?
Well, yeah, in Ohio, most cities are income tax driven. Other states, it might be sales tax or property tax. And so when you go to the voters for additional income tax increases, a lot of times that can be a real struggle and a hard sell. I walked into a very fortunate situation, and that was in 1992 when I came here. The city had an income tax increase, I think it was in the 80s. And the city financially had been well run, had been pretty conservative, kind of on a pay-as-you-go basis, very, very little debt, which kind of fit my style and I think council's style. And so we kind of continued that. And we were fortunate because we probably had a 30-year run. 25 of it was mine, but it was predated me by about 5 years. So we had 30 years plus without any income tax increase in the community, which is pretty unheard of. And we actually lowered the property taxes because in 1978, when Darrell Kenning was the manager, there were a number of road improvements that needed to take place. The city was growing rapidly, and they were looking at Clio Road and Alex Bell and other areas to do improvements. And so they had an issue, I think it was called Break the Bottle, and that was the bottleneck, and they were needing more money to widen some of the roads. And so they had a 20-year real estate measure that was put on the ballot, and it was passed. And so I came in 92, and then in 98, that street levy was expiring. And in 98, we were doing pretty well because we were getting a lot of new development and we were, paying our bills and paying attention to our expenditures. And so in 98, perhaps foolishly, I recommended to council that I didn't think we needed to renew that street levy. And so they let it drop. And we were still fine. And then about 2007, the recession started, 2008. And, that was the Great Recession. And we went through that for 10 years. And that was tough because, we tried not to lay people off, but we had people that were retiring that were not getting replaced. Wage increases were not, nil to nominal for most of that decade. And, but again, I attribute a lot of that to our employees because, we were open with them. They knew what the money situation was. They knew it wasn't growing during that time. And most of them were thankful to have their jobs and not be laid off as they knew others were. So they were very supportive. But so we went through about a 10-year period. So I think it was right before I retired. Council had decided Mark Kingseed was no longer the mayor, and Mark was extremely conservative. I'd say that if he were alive today, and he'd get a kick out of that. He'd take that as a badge of honor because he was never, in favor of raising taxes. But right as I was getting ready to retire, I think it was in 2016, council had a lot of discussion and decided to go ahead and put an income tax increase on the ballot, and it ended up and passed. And so I think it went into effect maybe a couple of months before I retired. But that was the first tax increase we'd had probably in 30 plus years.
Wow. So got a lot done.
So yeah, and our people did a lot with a little. They really did.
Yeah, that's great. We're almost out of time. I would really love to talk to you about just some of your favorite parts around the community. So you've lived here for 33 years.
Right.
What are the places that are most meaningful to you and your family?
Wow, that's a good question. We've always liked Benham's Grove because it's been close. You could walk through there occasionally. Yeah. We walk a lot. So we love to walk out past St. Leonard, Forestfield Park area, back through the ponds and the nature area. And we'll walk out to Wilmington Pike, with the extension of, was it Bill Yuck Park, I guess, in that area. So I really, really like the outdoor areas. Yankee Trace, favorite spot. I don't really spend much time there anymore.
You're not a big golfer?
No, I'm not. Yeah. I've pretty much given up golf, but all the years of being involved in the development, those were great memories because, we started with machetes with the golf course architect literally walking through kind of a woods, clearing the path and setting the stakes and figuring out where the center lines for the holes were going to be. And I can still remember being out there on tops of dirt piles, putting in little flags to figure out where we wanted to locate the clubhouse because we had that large power line that went through the golf course. We wanted to make sure that people didn't have their views obstructed from the patio. And so, just so much detail and effort went into that. So that always has a special place. Yeah.
And that road is named after you.
The parking lot entrance. But that's a very, very nice gesture. It was very, very humbling. But I always told my wife, I said it should say Greg Horn Way et al. Because there's so many hands in that. But nice gesture.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it's a great community. Good memories. Like you guys raising your kids here, sports, all that sort of thing. We got tremendous outdoor recreation facilities and I know when we first moved here, Shirley Heinz always recommended, she said, you got to think about living in the Pleasant Hill neighborhood. And it really, she was exactly right. With 3 kids growing and 3 active boys, they could go to Bill's Donuts, they could go to the swimming pool, they could walk to Benham's Grove, they could go over to the schools, over the street, over the hill to the high school. And so it saved my wife a lot of trips in the minivan over the years. Yeah. So we've got a lot of good memories of the neighborhood as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been great having you share some of these stories. I think they're very important ones to hear the background of. Yeah. So I appreciate you being here.
I've enjoyed it. Great community and a tremendous future, I believe.
Yeah. What's next for you? What are you most interested in right now?
Well, I had a friend that used to be the city manager in Cincinnati, and he asked me to come to work for him part-time. And I told him I would take off a full year before I did that. So I lasted about 6 months, and then he called me again, and I started doing some consulting work for him. And I did that for about 4 or 5 years, just a few hours a week, but enough to stay busy and keep my thumb on things. And then he sold out to an international company, Baker Tilly, about 3 years ago. And so I got 3 or 4 of my colleagues, and we started a firm about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so now we're doing consulting in the Midwest, and I'm doing mostly recruitment, young city managers, fire chiefs, police chiefs. And so I enjoy that.
That's great.
And then we do a lot of traveling, and we've got 6 grandchildren. And so that keeps us busy with baseball games and things. And I've got a 93-year-old mother that is still in her home in Wooster, and we're trying to help her through some issues with a recent fire that she had. And my wife's got her 93-year-old mother that we're helping in Cincinnati, who's still in her home. So we're as busy as ever.
Wow. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, we're
definitely.
as busy as ever.
Got three generations or 4 generations to manage.
That's right. But keeps us active.
That's great. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
We'll go ahead and close by saying thank you to MVCC to helping to produce this podcast, and of course to Greg Horn, my guest. If you have an interesting story about Centerville or Washington Township, please contact Centerville-Washington History. Please also come visit our museums in Uptown Centerville, Tuesday through Friday, 12 o'clock to 4 p.m. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram and watch for upcoming events posted on our website at centervillewashingtonhistory.org. Thank you and goodbye.